Hello and welcome to Planet NOLA. I'm your host, Mary Jacobs. Welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited you're here joining us. Today we have my old pal, my good old bud, Bob Murrell. Bob is so many things. I want to say first that Bob ran for local city council last year, right? 2021, which was like my biggest reason for having him here. I'm like, we've got to talk about this. He could potentially be running again. He gave me a little like tabloid style, maybe so a moment ago. And Bob's also a father, a comedian, an actor, a computer nerd. I hope that's the proper term that I used for your job title. Okay. Yes. And we go way back to high school days. We did speech and debate and competed against each other at high schools. We had a good old time.
Oh yeah. I won more often.
I don't know about all that. I don't know if you. I think that you might be misremembering Stacey Schlumbrecht and I annihilating duo.
Oh well, yeah, and duo, yeah.
Yeah, that's what was my category. I did duo and comedy, and that was pretty much it. Yeah. But impromptu, oh my god.
Yeah.
Riverdale had an impromptu category.
We did that. Was it extemporaneous? Student Congress is what. Like I was like state champ twice in student.
I never did student Congress, so that's why we didn't cross over as much because I was more the drama and comedy.
And then I didn't start doing like humorous interp, like all those interp events. I didn't do that until senior year.
Okay, yeah. See, that's what I did the whole time.
Yeah, see, I won city and HI.
So that's nice. I won city and HI one year.
Oh, did you?
It was obviously not the year that you did, but I think you're a year older than me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bob, what the heck? Why would anyone run for city council in this city? Not trying to throw arrows, but I just need to get in your brain a little bit, you know?
So my brain is different than a lot of other brains because the people that run for office may do it for legacy, you know, like their parents or grandparents did it. A lot of them are like, there's a lot of familial relationships in the city politics, of which I have none of that.
Yeah.
It really wasn't until my daughter was born that I was like, oh, maybe I should stop being like a commentator or a spectator and like try to channel some of my energy into, you know, making the changes that are very easy to make, but just need the right people to do it. So I started volunteering on campaigns, and then I kept hearing people asking me for years saying like, you should definitely run whenever I start talking about issues and stuff. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. But like I said, once you know, being a parent changes you a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it was going to change me in that way, but it kind of did. Like I'm a very motivated, ambitious person, and you know, it was an opening. So
yeah. So you basically having a kid, you were like, I guess I have to do something to fix this friggin' world.
Well, like I mean, we loved growing up in New Orleans, right?
Right.
Like it defines a certain part of who you are.
Yeah.
And I just like want my kid to experience this city the way that I did, and maybe not in a nostalgic way, but like I said, the people of New Orleans have just a very specific, unique character trait, right?
Yeah.
Like when we meet people that we never met before, we're always instantly looking for like the closest relationship we can find to that person, so they're not a stranger.
Yeah.
They're like a next of kin or like a friend of a friend.
How do I relate to you?
Yeah, so that's always like, you know, where'd you go to high school is about. It's not about like judging you for going to Newman or you know, like anything like that, but it's like, oh, I know people that go to Newman, or I know people that go to these schools. You know this
person, you know that person.
Exactly.
Like, oh, you did this sport at this time. Like, I bet you know this person.
Like 6 degrees, making it like even shorter distances between each other. And you're not going to find that anywhere else in America, at least.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's something worth preserving. So, yeah, I think a lot of people see the trajectory of the city going in a direction that's not very tenable, right? Like, our streets have been terrible for 40 years. Mm-hmm. Our school system has always had issues, and then they seem to be new issues or new manifestations of that. And you just see that there's tons of money. Like the city council budget was its largest it's ever been. Like I think it reached $1 billion.
Whoa.
And That's so much money.
And
How is it not going to?
Yeah, that's crazy. And so
Yeah.
even before we started this episode, I was asking Bob preliminary questions because I'm like, I don't know. I was like, how many representatives do we have in a district? And you were saying it's one a district. District A is one person.
Mm-hmm.
And you described the size of District A, and it's huge.
Yeah, there's 5 districts for the entire city.
Yeah.
And then the 2 at large. And you look at like comparable cities that are around the same size as New Orleans, it's somewhere between like 7 and like 12 or 13.
Wow.
districts.
So we really need more districts.
It depends on what you want city council to be.
Okay,
right? 'Cause
interesting.
City council is like our legislative branch, but they're also like our only community relations that we have with like anytime you have an issue with like, oh, like the power's out, you go to Entergy, but you can also like go to your city council person and they'll figure it out. And like Councilmember Geruso, who's my city council district member, he fields so much just like on social media, like living in people's comments of like,
Right.
like yeah, send me your info and we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And that's the only lifeline we have is with city council, because the mayor's office has district offices, but they're not open all the time. They're not dedicated resources. You know?
So our city council people literally are representing us to the greater city.
Yes.
Ideally.
And they're doing, writing the laws of the city. They're also regulating Entergy and all these other utility companies that they have a lot of responsibilities.
Right.
And it's crazy that it's only 7 people
That's
that are doing that.
I know. Well, just now when you were telling me there's 5 districts, I was just like, really?
Yeah.
That's it? There's only 5 people, and then there's a council head, I assume, or like
there's 2 at large. There's the president
large.
and the vice president. So
Right.
Councilmember Moreno is the president.
Got it.
And Councilmember Murrell is vice president.
I'm so glad you're explaining this very basic thing about our city's council because I don't know.
Civics 101.
Truly, you just forget. Like, I go vote every year for my council people, and I know they represent me in some facet, but I'm like, in what facet exactly are they representing me? Because, I'm not dealing with them. I will say, though, when we had that flood the other day, literally was that yesterday or the day before?
Yeah.
My mother, my mother is big about contacting. She's always contacting her council people when things aren't going her way. But she didn't contact him, but she saw that he had already contacted Sewage and Water Board demanding an explanation. She's like, I don't like him. He's already like doing what we want him to do,
Yeah.
And she's real into being connected to her council person because it's gotten stuff done for her in the past. I mean, we've lived in this exact spot for like over 30 years now, so she really like takes pride in her community, and I see her like make her little active citizen steps to like, get help when she wants it and like demand for it. She's real like active in that way, it's very sweet.
Yeah. and doing canvassing and stuff and going into these different communities, I heard that so often about like, I try to reach them and they're not answering, or like I write and I write and I write and there's just like no progress. They come up with excuses for, oh, it's out of our control, out of our hands type of thing. And that was the most frequent thing that I heard from people. Even though Councilmember Geruso is probably one of the most proactive representatives, it's still just insufficient.
Right.
And I think it's more of a structural issue, which is like, why is that the way it needs to work? It just seems...
Yeah, it seems like it's not enough hands for the work.
Exactly.
Yeah. It seems like it's way too small, and there needs to be more systems in place so that people can move their issues through it.
Yeah.
And it's not just one guy replying to comments on Instagram or Facebook. You know what I mean?
I would assume some of his staffers probably have
right.
one,
I
yes.
assume that too. I assume that too. But it's like, even so, it's like so archaic. Like, that's such a strange... Yeah. It's like literally writing a letter and like just sending it into the world and being like, maybe I'll get a response.
Yeah.
And then it's like billions of those. And these people are like fielding that all day. It's like, why is this the way we're doing this?
Yeah. And like my experience as a software developer, like, you release a product and they have help sections. Like, I have a bug. How do I report a bug? Or like, I have a feature request. Like, I would love it to do this instead of that. And all of those things, depending on the software company, handle it different ways, but you still have that basic like intake.
Yeah.
It's not based on relationships that you have with human beings. It's like
data intake.
You're providing a service that I pay for.
Yeah.
And it's not doing what I'm paying for. So why is it not happening.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy to think that there's so many problems that people encounter on a daily basis here, whether it's with your internet, with street flooding, with...
Oh, our lights have been out for months. They just keep going out at Elysian, like major lights. And I feel like I've been seeing that across the city lately. They'll just be out for days at a time. I'm like, what? This is so unsafe.
Yeah.
So unsafe.
And what's kind of frustrating that everyone has is that, like, that's a shared thing that's not just happening in Lakeview or in Gentilly or in any specific... It's citywide. Yeah. It's a systemic problem.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing that I tried to approach from it. It was like, this system is not designed to handle the way that our government is now structured. Like, neoliberalism has kind of gutted a lot of the public safety net that we have, and now you have like nonprofits doing it, or now you have for-profit companies handling your garbage.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that these systems just are broken. Maybe it's not the individual people that are making up the system. Maybe it's just, the structure of the system is not engineered to help. That's
what I'm saying with the letters coming in. It's like, that is not, I mean, in my business, when something is not working, we have, I'm going to use an example.
Yes.
We have a follow-up. When members haven't been coming to class, after a week, we send them a message, be like, hey, where were you last week? Because we're a real small community-based gym, and we like to check on people, and we have a little program that tells us who's been absent for how long. And we send them a message, and we check on them. And we didn't have a good follow-up system for knowing where people are. Say Bob's out of town for a week, and only one trainer knows that. But if they write it in this doc that we've now made, everyone can see the doc. So if they're like, where's Bob been all the week? And before that trainer shoots you a text like, Bob, where you been all week? They go to the doc and see if anyone's reached out to you, and we know you're out of town.
Yep.
And we solved that problem this week. It's like, all we need is a doc that everyone can see, and the problem will be solved. It's like, you have to build systems that are more effective. And if it's like, if you have user dissatisfaction, people are always complaining that they're not being heard and that their problems aren't being solved. It's like, if there's user dissatisfaction, you build a new system.
Yeah.
You don't just like continue on the same road, And I feel like that's where people get frustrated as like politically active citizens. They're like, well, I try and nothing changes. Yeah. And it's like, well, because people are, and I feel like there's probably a lot of red tape, obviously, and especially in government, adding anything and changing the way you do anything is its own long process. But it's like, that's what you friggin' sign up for, right? Is like this like tedious little bitty, I don't know, details.
And that's why so many of the people that are in the system are either of the legal profession or, like some extension of that, because like you said, the ability to track every single one of these
little
conflicting requirements, stuff like that. Yeah. But I'm glad you talked about that document that you have, because it's about transparent, open, active communication.
Exactly.
Right? And that's like how software moves in such a rapid, we call it agile, because it's designed to go towards results, not towards processes. Right. It's designed to make sure that if you're going to have a team of people, that they are able to work without obstacles.
Yeah.
So like, one of the things that I used to do as a Scrum Master, completely separate discussion. I know I'm segueing, but like, my job as a Scrum Master was to get hurdles out of people's way so that they can get to where they need to go, right? And if two different team members are working on things at the same time
and not communicating with each other,
yes, then you're bound to run into collision, whether that's someone assumed something else or someone didn't know that person was going to do something and they step on each other's toes. And that's like the role of like a Scrum Master or someone that's involved, where they're not a member of a team, but they help, sort of negotiate and mediate towards the end goal, which is getting shit done.
Making living better for everyone involved. It's such a, at its core, a noble cause, like the idea of being any kind of representative of the people, because ultimately what you're going to be fielding all of the time is negative feedback and very little positive feedback. And that's what you're signing up for, is to hear people tell you what's not working. And damn, like, damn. You got to have some thick skin.
I mean,
you got to be in it for the right reasons, like.
Doing stand-up comedy at some shitty bar in Alabama and getting heckled like my entire set is very much the striking of the iron.
It set you up.
It molds you and it hardens you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that you talk about that, because doing like sound engineering, like I used to do that sometimes in theater, and like they told you're doing the best job when no one notices that you're even doing the work that you're doing. The only time that you're ever going to hear anything is negative feedback. And it's just one of those things that I think people's expectations of how things should be, when they're not being met, that's what drives people to want to give that feedback.
Yeah.
But if so many different people have so many different expectations, then you're going to get conflicting negative feedback too.
Brutal.
Yeah.
So I mean, good on you for even wanting to deal with the people of the city.
And my whole philosophy behind it is like direct democracy. Like I want the people to hopefully like figure stuff out on their own. Like if you're having an issue in your community that you can resolve, why can't you resolve it?
Right. Yeah. But I mean, my question comes in with, well, isn't that why they pay taxes?
Yeah.
Like, isn't it, if we're supposedly in this system where we pay all this tax money and all these whatever, all the money that we put into the system, why is the system not working for us? You know, and it's like I think community initiatives are great, but it's like, what is all happening with all the money that's getting funneled into the city if it's not fixing the problems, you know? And that's the question in New Orleans forever. The tale as old as time is, because we know what happens to the money in this city, because we've seen it happen time and time again. Like, my parents have been here their whole lives. I've been hearing stories about corrupt politicians in this city my entire life. Like, since I was a child, I have understood that New Orleans government is corrupt. Like, that has been my branding and understanding of City Hall in this city my whole life. Never positive, like only negative. There's been moments where mayors have done things that my family has liked, but for the most part, it's like, and there's also like news to back it up, like literal people going to jail that have represented our city and state, like for serious crimes, So
every decade we're due for some, federal indictment to come down.
Truly.
And it's not
our
just...
DA is getting indicted right now.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if the actual indictment is,
or not
is
indicted,
going forward,
but
like investigated.
Investigated, right? That's what I meant. I'm sorry, I don't want
taxes.
I don't want to spread fake news, but investigated for his tax behavior.
Yeah, and it's and it's not even just limited to the people that are elected officials necessarily, but you also have the people inside City Hall that I guess you call them bureaucrats, that I don't think get enough focus from like the general scope of the media. But like independent media has always been like showcasing, like, look at all this corrupt shit that's going on. And it's just a matter of people either listening to it and ignoring it, or people just not looking for that independent source of media. Like the Lens has been doing so much incredible work on the smart cities thing that came up recently.
I don't think I know what that is.
All right, so this is a long-winded thing, but Smart Cities is this initiative to try to give free internet access to low-income households across the city. But it's also designed for like trying to make this network of connected devices that have cameras and Wi-Fi, and it's a whole network and system designed to, like, say for street flooding, having your street lights be able to see that it's flooding and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, the people that are trying to sell us this initiative include people that are actually working inside City Hall that are handling
I have heard of this. I have.
And it's slowly gaining in scope how many people are involved in this, to the point where City Council actually sent out, what are those called? Like where they're trying to get people to make their statements, and only 2 of them responded. The 2 that have had the most dirt exposed on them, they were the 2 that were the most compliant. The other 3 asked for an extension. The extension went through, and then finally they just like completely skipped out on it. So they just filed them for contempt of counsel, one of which is the like head lawyer for the mayor's office. And not only did he sue the city, he sued it in the capacity of the city against City Council. So now he's using tax dollars to start litigation to prevent him from testifying about this.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
And it gives me flashbacks to when Nagin, his chief technology officer, Tim Mefford, or Greg Mefford, he also had some like insider maneuvering of some of the technology contracts. And that's what eventually led Nagin to being arrested, was from this same thing. It's time is a flat circle.
Yeah, it's
or a bowl-shaped circle.
It's so absurd.
Yeah.
It's so absurd.
It's comedy.
It is comedy. It is
Yeah.
absurdism. It is absurdism that people continuously choose bad behavior, things they know are unethical, when they have chosen these positions representing a greater people, and yet they continuously choose these selfish, egocentric ways. It's like, it's a capitalism. You could do anything. You could start a private business and be protected by that private business and make as much capital as you want. But if you're going to serve a people, if you work in City Hall in any capacity, you are there serving the people.
Yes.
Like whatever the job is, from the janitors all the way up to the council, the mayor, you're serving the people of this city in a capacity. And it's like, you could do anything else, You don't have to rip off the people you're supposed to be representing. It's disgusting. And that's why that's why my parents, my whole life, have said the city is corrupt. I have this understanding that our city is corrupt because this trend happens. And why does it always happen? Does it happen in other cities at the capacity it happens here? I'm sure it does.
Maybe in like very large cities like Chicago and New York and LA. Like LA has a lot of corruption issues that are similar, but that's because they're massive, right?
And it's like so much to manage.
There's a lot of opportunities for grifting.
Yeah.
But in New Orleans, like you said, it's just a historical thing. When you start making government a family business, it shouldn't be a business at all,
Quite
right?
literally, people,
but you to have a lineage, to have it to where, and it comes down to name recognition. It comes down to building those, familiar relationships and like families.
It's so funny we should have just elect people on their names. They're like, I know this name, click. That is how people vote.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
Like, we've got to stop doing that.
And of the people that vote, that only makes up like less than 30% of the people that are registered to vote. So there's I think that represents such a small amount of our voter base. The other is that they do recognize those names, and they're the only names, and that's why they're not going to vote.
Yeah.
Or they don't feel like they're inspired by a specific candidate
right.
to drive them to want to go to a poll.
Right.
Like,
my friend Marcel, who was on the podcast, said, I don't know if she said it on air or not, but she said, voter suppression is convincing people their vote doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like voter suppression has done its job at that point. It's convinced people that their vote doesn't count or matter. And I was like, damn, that's so real. And I get it.
Yeah.
But you're right. And but people like you, Bob, running, even just running and like talking about it. I'm glad you're here talking about it. We are starting to break the pattern of being like, this is not normal. This is not acceptable. And the more and more of us that can gather up and be like, yeah, this is not normal. Like, this is not acceptable. Like, that is how change happens. It's small incremental changes. It's like celebrating the like inches we get, in a system that is built to oppress and like exploit. And so it's like every inch we can get of liberation or radicalness, like I get happy and I try to celebrate the littlest movement in that direction because it's such tiny incremental things.
It's a spark.
Yeah.
And once it reaches to, a full-fledged fire, that's when I think we'll start to see, the light of liberation, finding those moments where we can actually feel free.
Yeah.
It's an inspiring movement,
Truly.
and art, I think, has always been, and music, especially in New Orleans, has been those moments of like true freedom where you just lose yourself.
Yeah, you can express. You can just express yourself.
And it's so interesting to see sort of the liberation movements that are happening in New Orleans in, like the activist circles or just in like old school organizing and finding their ways for like self-determination, for continuously fighting and pushing against those extractive systems. I think that's the inspiring stuff. And it just sucks that in this ever connected world that we do live in, overly connected sometimes, that we still lose sight of these things happening.
Yeah, because the thing about being completely connected is that we are still consuming it in this very self-centered way.
Mm-hmm.
We've got our own algorithm that tells us exactly what we want to consume in the way we'd like to consume it. You know, it's not a full worldview, and it's not like representative of everything truly around us. It's a very condensed worldview. The people that we know, the people we grew up with, the people that share things we actually like, and that's what we see. It's the more, and I'm always on my phone, so I'm preaching to the choir here, but the more we lock in as this is our only source of connectivity, the more unconnected we're going to get. And the way that we break those cycles is by having conversations, meeting people, me understanding city council better, you know, like little things. Like, do I still think city council is the way for me? No, I think we need to make some major changes. But like, do I need to have more comprehensive understanding of it so that I can understand the city, how it moves, how people in it work and get to work and etc. Like, yes, I need to have a more comprehensive, and the only way I'm going to get that is by having conversations and living in the real world with those people. You know, or
sure.
Like reading things online and getting bored out of my mind. But I'm not going to do that. You know, I'll do it to an extent, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's definitely like individualism, you know,
Totally
and you talk about capitalism, like how the effects of alienation that are built into the system are intentional, right?
Intentional. I always say this.
And you know,
I always say this.
Marx even talks about how the demise of capitalism comes in its structures, and it talks about like these industrial workers are all crammed into these terrible working conditions within close proximity, and those are the most ripe opportunities for labor organizing.
Yeah.
Same with tenants. If you have like an awful landlord of a human being who has these, you know, tenements or like huge apartment buildings where people are crammed into these tiny little, you know, spaces.
Yeah.
Again, same thing. That's the ripe opportunity because they're all living under the
right
same
on top
shitty
of each other. Here we are.
Material conditions.
Let's start talking. Let's start doing stuff.
And so I think one of the cleverest moves that have been made from capitalism in, you know, the modern world is how do we separate people while still letting them feel connected. So mass communication has really done that.
Yeah.
I think remote learning is another opportunity that's been to like squash labor movements because now like people aren't even living in the same state, so you may not even be able to organize them because even though they're on payroll in
remote
your state,
working, you mean? Like,
they don't live near you. So like, how the hell do I try to organize my workplace when I've never actually met any of my coworkers in person, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you said, I think the intentional engagement of interpersonal connection starts to break down those walls of individualism. And the more we start to see ourselves as a wider collective of human beings, I think that's when the movement starts to grow. That's when we start to feel, you know, love and joy shared around.
That's when we break down all of the homophobia and the racism and the ableism and the ageism. That's where we do that work so that we can connect. Yes. That's why we're doing that base work right now where we're like, we need to have critical race theory. We need to like really know how to show up in these spaces and be truly in community with each other. It's so real. Yeah. Okay, we have to take a break, but we'll be right back. Hello, it's your host, Mary Jacobs. I'm sitting here with my producer, Carrie Mulder, and we are so excited to be bringing you Planet NOLA this episode and every episode. We really believe in this podcast and the work it's doing in New Orleans to build community, to reach out to people, and we really love what we do.
Yeah, we love our guests, we love our audience, our listeners, we love each other. It's just a big love fest.
So if you love this podcast and you believe in what we're doing, it would mean the world to us if you considered subscribing to our Patreon. We've just launched it. The lowest tier is $5, and we are just really trying to get this podcast to pay for itself a little bit, maybe support ourselves just a little bit more. We're both creative people who have a lot of projects, and this is a big one in our lives, and there is bonus content.
Yeah, it's really fun. It takes a deep dive into the episode, kind of circle back to some of the topics. They've been fun.
Yeah, we basically record with the guests as soon as we're done their episode and do a more candid version of their podcast. It's shorter, but it's more self-effacing, and it feels like just real, you know?
It's BTS, behind the scenes.
It's the BTS. So if you want more Planet NOLA content, you could subscribe to our Patreon and get it. It would mean so much to us. So, okay, we'll let you go back to your episode now, but please consider.
Thank you.
Bye. This episode of Planet NOLA is brought to you by Vitality Community Fitness. Vitality is a functional training gym located in Metairie, Louisiana. And at Vitality, we focus on members as individuals. That's right. We don't lump people together. We don't assume that everybody has the same goals when they step into our gym. We also don't push things like body ideals or diet culture. We try to focus on the full person, and we try to give an experience that matches that. We've got incredible coaches. We've got an incredible community. And if you're looking for a place to call your new gym home, consider checking us out. We offer a 3 free class trial. That's right. Literally no commitment. You can try 3 of our classes in a week to see if our gym is for you, because ultimately we want people who want to be there. And if it sounds like this might be the space for you, please consider checking us out. You can go to vitalitycommunityfitness.com, click the contact button, and get started. And we're back to Planet NOLA. I'm still here with my buddy Bob. We've been talking about New Orleans political landscape, corruption, running for local office, what is local office, among many other things. Bob was teasing me before the podcast that you may or may not run again. What's your likelihood of running again?
I don't know, man. Like 4 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Right? A lot can change. Like my hesitancy to run in the first place is that like I want to prop up non-white men
right.
into office, and I don't want to contribute to that lack of representation. That's always been my hesitation. When I ran in District A, I had the feeling that Joe was not going to draw a lot of challengers and so it was considered like a safe seat. And I was like, well, that at least gives me the opportunity to like be as real as possible.
Yeah.
To really confront issues that are being neglected by your current sitting council member, you know,
right.
and really touch upon like how not just he could do better, but like how in general the flaw of the system, like what we've been talking about. But when it's an open election, you never know who's going to run. So like if there's someone that lives in District A that is not a straight white man, that is espousing some similar values to me, I would probably work to getting that person elected over me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I said, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, the next council is in 4 years. Is that what you're saying? Is 4
yeah,
years?
so 2021 and 2025. Yeah,
oh,
they do it the off year from the presidential election. It's lame.
Jeez.
Yeah. Imagine the voter turnout we'd have if it was on the same year as the president.
It'd be so much more convenient also.
Yes.
Just be like, you know what, this is the year we vote. Let's just get it out of the friggin' way.
Yeah. And I know that there are definitely a lot of states that are trying to move to that, but I think municipally we should absolutely, if you want to talk about strengthening democracy, like our democracy's under attack right now. It's like, it's kind of always been under attack, right? Because it's never really been like
fully developed.
Yeah. The representative democratic model is flawed if money can just flow.
It's hardly democratic.
Yeah, exactly.
Hardly democratic.
Yeah.
It's under threat because it's never actually been really what it's supposed to be.
Right. When you look at, like, I've been reading this book about the Russian Revolution, and like to go from the czar to like a full socialist country had to go through phases, right? And one of those phases was the Dumas, which is like their like Congress, their provisional government that they're trying to form. And like reading it, the way they talk about representative democracy is like that's the stage that you need to get to, but it's not the end all stage.
Right.
Because if you leave it there, it's just as bad as if you had an autocratic, monarch, which is what they had, and it kept going back and forth between that state because it's designed in a way that assumes a lot of good faith. And if that good faith is not there,
and
if
as
you have
we've explained, there's hardly good faith to
or
go
you have
around.
opportunists that see the flaws and can take advantage of that to their own benefit, which we see all the time.
Yeah.
Then you're never going to have a democracy that's functioning for the representation of the majority while protecting the minority. And instead, we have an inverse of that where you have minority rule at the expense of the majority.
Yeah.
And that continues to happen on a federal, state, and local level.
If you had a wish for your average New Orleanian citizen to become more politically active, what would that wish be? Like, what do you want of people to do? I mean, you don't expect everybody to run for office.
I mean, why not though?
Sure.
Like it's a challenge, right?
But that's like the biggest undertaking. I'm talking Joe Schmo. I'm never running for office. I own 2 businesses. You know how busy I am? I would be corrupt as hell because I would be so tired.
Yeah.
I'd be trying to get all the money. I get it.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I would never. I wouldn't steal from the New Orleans government. I promise.
Yeah. Not intentionally.
Not intentionally.
Yeah. Only if it's like slipped in your back pocket.
Yeah, yeah. If I'm paid strictly in flowers and fine chocolates,
Yeah.
that doesn't count.
And it's funny that you talk about not everybody wanting to run for office, because there are definitely people that run for office just to run for office. And there's like this whole like business industry in New Orleans for local politics.
Just to run.
Yeah, like they're like...
Is it like a show, like a debutante ball
No,
or something?
I mean, they may feel that way. I don't know. But I feel like, when I registered and, qualified for it, I put, like, my email address and my phone number, like, not thinking that, oh, that's public information now, and all these grifters are going to start, like, trying to run your campaign for you. Like, there was someone who, like, contacted me. He's like, hey, I'm glad you're running, and I'd love to sit down. I'm like, yeah, sure, okay. And then he's like pitching me like, yeah, I'm just going to run your campaign for you. I'm going to get 10% of all the fundraising that happens. And I'm like, well, I have pledges for campaign funding. Like, who are you thinking of trying to get this money from? And he starts reeling off all these names of like, millionaires and oligarchs in our city, like Sidney Torres and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't want Sidney Torres's money. No.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, well, that puts me in a real bind. I'm like, I mean, you don't have this job. Who are you?
Yeah,
You're a stranger who cold called me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And when it comes to like yard signs, when it comes to mailers, the mailers are the craziest thing about this, right? Like
Why?
the little ballots that they send out.
Uh-huh.
So there are some groups out there whose sole function is to send these ballots out. So they will
keep names off of it. And
well, not only that, but there's pro ratas, right? Uh-huh. Where, all right, our mailer campaign is going to cost $20,000. So you owe me $3,000. Mm-hmm. And so for them, it's a moneymaker because they're not doing anything other than like, asking a printing company to print and distribute this mailer with these people's faces on it. Like they don't actually make a product.
Yeah.
And they're only getting paid by these political campaigns who are in turn raising money based on the support that they have. It's just a cycle.
Wild.
Yes. And
exhausting.
And when you look at like the political campaign contributions, but also the expenditures, that's where you start to see where this money is coming from and where it's going.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a circle.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense to me. Okay, but aside from running from office,
Yes.
though, what's your dream for a New Orleans resident to be more politically active? How can they do it? What should they do?
It's not easy, right? I know that we're the big easy, but it's a difficult task. You got to read a bunch, right? It's boring, I know, but like I cut out my time from Facebook to just like read news articles, history about New Orleans, and it's hard. But I would hope that they just step out of their comfort zone, lean into the discomfort. If you feel like you have a passion that something could be better, then start being uncomfortable about it. Like start asking your elected officials what are they going to do about it? Why isn't it being done now? Go to these meetings. They have plenty of neighborhood meetings all the time.
Do you go to your neighborhood meetings?
I'm a member of my neighborhood association, so like I go to them all the time, and like that's where I'll hear like Jason Williams saying that he regrets saying he doesn't want to charge kids as adults.
Yeah.
Like he made that pledge during his campaign as a progressive DA.
Well, I remember.
But to a room full of older white conservative people, he's like, that's a mistake and I regret it, and got like a round of applause for it. And it's just like, oh.
He can say that in this room.
Yeah, he doesn't know that I'm here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I actually asked him about the surveillance ordinance that he helped pass on city council, because now NOPD is trying to not only roll it back, but expand the surveillance that they want to use. And it was interesting to like...
Those are those camera lights, those ones that flash, those obnoxious friggin'
Yeah,
lights.
there's hundreds of them.
So many of them.
I got into this...
what do they even do?
So there's a lot of things that they do. There's this whole multi-million-dollar system called the Real-Time Surveillance Center, and it is a fucking dystopian wall of monitors, and there's like 2 or 3 people that are just watching it, and then they'll get like a radio call to look at a certain neighborhood, and they'll do that. And what's insane about it is that there's no transparency on like who these people are, what procedures there's, and they'll say, oh, we have policies. But then when you start to do like Freedom of Information Act requests on them,
who has access to this footage?
Yeah, exactly. So they share it with like law enforcement in general. So like ICE, the FBI. So in theory, they could, deport people using these surveillance systems. They can use it to extradite people to other states. But what they're using it for mostly, that has been like shown in these legal documents, is not violent crime. It's on trying to get felons with guns on them to send them back to jail. It's to mostly deal with drugs and also labor disputes.
Whoa.
There were a couple of firefighters who were in a labor dispute because someone filed for being injured on the job. And they use surveillance footage from these crime cameras to show that their story didn't quite add up. And so they're using this to target union workers in our city government rather than, allegedly stop violent crime.
They're like, claiming it's for.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And none of this stuff was even readily available. Like, I want to say like 6 or 7 years ago when they first started coming up. I tried to send a Freedom of Information request, and it got denied for Homeland Security reasons, because Homeland Security is one of the departments that's involved with this.
Has access to this footage.
So they said you can't know where they are, you can't know who's the vendor setting them up, and you can't know like the make and model of the devices.
So we are just living in Big Brother.
So eventually there was a lawsuit because they used this real-time camera to zoom in on a guy on a porch to do like a drug sting. And he was a guy who was on probation, didn't have drugs, none of that ever came to light. And in the process of fighting this in court for this client, that's when they were able to get a judge to say, no, you have to reveal the location of this. So now, like, if you go on the city's website, there's a whole data section where you can just get all the data. And I highly recommend it.
Whoa.
And so one of the data points that they now share is where all of these cameras are.
Yeah.
But the challenge is, like, the NOPD captains of each of these districts, they're the ones who say where they go. Mm-hmm. What policies dictate that, we don't know.
Yeah.
So I started working on trying to find the relation between like the racial makeup of these neighborhoods and how it compares to, if they were to arbitrarily place a camera versus are they putting them in black neighborhoods?
On purpose, yeah.
And that's how I kind of got into like eye on surveillance. And it's been like a never-ending fight to try to push back on state surveillance with the claim that it's there for our safety, but in actuality, it's not being used for that at all.
Yeah. Do I trust the government to surveil its people? No. The answer is absolutely no. They have a great history of surveilling its own people to do exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And now they're trying to use all these modern tools like facial recognition, stingrays, which are cell phone tower emulators. Mm-hmm. So in other words, they will pull up a car and your cell phone will think that's a cell phone tower rather than a real cell phone tower. So all the data that you send and receive from your phone is going through a cop car pretty much. They're trying to bring that back.
Why would they ever need that?
Terrorism, obviously. If the terrorist is in there sending texts, allegedly.
Is not what that's about.
They're also trying to bring back this thing called shot spotter, which is technology to detect gunshots. This was actually used during the Landrieu administration. They got rid of it because it doesn't actually work. Yeah. There's so many labeled and we live in a city with drums all the time. Yeah. We actively play gunshots or fireworks. Like this is not a city that's going to do that. But what we found was that there's a link to where they place these, and it's always in black neighborhoods. Always. And it gives them the foresight to say, oh, there's a potential gunshot. We can send in armed officers to this neighborhood. Yeah. So it focuses policing on specific communities that are already over-policed, and they claim that it's for trying to solve crimes, when in actuality it's just to...
What's your political platform on defunding the police?
I mean, yeah, like I phrased it as balancing the budget or flipping the budget. Like shout out to the Gordon Plaza organizers, because they've always been about flip the budget. Like, take them down NOLA, flip the budget.
Yeah.
And it showcases like the disproportionate spending on police. So that was my platform. Like I if someone said, do you support defunding the police? I would say yes.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's what my policy is. Like, and show concrete examples of where we can take money that's being spent.
In New Orleans specifically, can you
Yeah.
be really specific what that would look like if it were up to you?
Sure. So my thing is, like, why are we paying cops to get better at killing people? Is that their job, to kill people? Mm-hmm. So why are we spending money on so many rounds of munition for training? Why are we spending it on the gun range time? If we don't want our cops to kill people, why are we training them to kill people? Mm-hmm. So that's one example of where we can take very specific large amounts of funding away from that and into other programs. Mm-hmm. Mental health crises responses. Help Not Handcuffs was a big program at the time when I was running, and I was a vocal supporter of that as well, where 911 calls for any event that could potentially be a mental crises event. You don't send a cop, you send, a social worker or some other entity that is not,
crisis response
with a gun
team that is trained in mental health.
And there's about a half dozen programs already in place in major cities. Like Denver just released the data on their pilot program, and like it had this huge reduction in amount of incidents with police as a result of that, without any increase in cost. So
right.
it was more cost effective to do this than to send a cop out to do it.
Right.
More likely you're not going to arrest someone. More likely you're not going to send someone through the criminal justice system.
I've had an experience during lockdown where it was definitely a mental health crisis, and we were in this really hard position where we knew if we called the police, it would escalate. Yeah. But there was nobody that we could call. I was like calling friends that were therapists. Like it was such a tough position to be in. And afterwards I found out we've had programs here that are for that exact thing. But I don't even know about those programs. I don't even trust calling 911 to be like, hey, I have someone in mental health crises.
And they'll put you on hold.
I know that they're going to send a cop with a gun on their hip, which I would never want to be the person that called the cop on someone in a mental health crisis. Yeah. With, an untrained, trigger-happy police officer, way more trained in shooting a gun than he is at talking to people. Yeah. So.
And like you said, they have had programs that existed, but they're not scaled up to handle the entire city. They're more importantly, the fact that they exist and no one knows about it shows another flaw with it, which is like
I didn't know there was a
how are they not integrated into the emergency response system already? Like, to have this disparate program floating about, taking tax dollars and not actively being used.
Yeah, it's if you
then what's the
have
point
to call
of this?
911 and specifically request, can I please have someone that's not an armed police officer?
And as a result of the Help Not Handcuffs campaign, we were able to get a task force created, headed by Councilmember Moreno, and they weren't even meeting at the start of this year. It just didn't get scheduled. It didn't happen. and now they're starting to happen. And Moreno's office released this whole plan to crime. And one of the things they're saying is we're just going to kickstart this program. We don't need a task force.
Let's just do it.
Get it happening, because it's clearly something that's going to save money. It's going to move police away from doing nonviolent crimes. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing too, is that the police force that we have right now is less than 1,000, and it's okay, if you have a job shortage or whatever, you're going to put them in places why are they doing any of this shit?
Get help.
Yeah, if my
delegate.
job.
Once again, I own a business, and when I have too many tasks on my plate, I delegate.
Yes.
I delegate.
If you go to a grocery store and you're short staffed, you're not going to have someone randomly sweeping and dusting. Yeah. That's not a priority.
No, you need every stocker you can have, every cashier you can have.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's not efficient, and a lot of it is the political, how hard it is to change things and get things moved around. And that's why it takes people that are willing to do the work and change the systems. And that's why I'm grateful to people like you for being in our city, because even just taking the time to educate yourself, being able to articulate what's going on and sharing it with people that are listening right now is so important and I appreciate it.
That's why I'm here.
Hell yeah. All right, I want to ask you our $1 million question.
Sure.
It's if you had an unlimited budget right now, someone said you can do whatever you want in your city, here's however much money you need, what's the first thing you would do with that money?
Make sure we don't have any homeless people.
Yeah.
I think having a guaranteed
How would you
right
do that?
How would I do
Yeah.
it? Oh, I have no idea. There's a lot smarter people than me that have
You would
plans.
give the money to someone to figure that out.
Yes, I would make sure that, like, for number one, we would stop commodifying housing. So no more unlimited Airbnbs.
Yes.
Heavy regulation on rental properties, especially like multiple property landlords, like the ones that own like
half the city.
20 apartment buildings and they're all terrible.
Yeah.
Like I don't care about small landlords. I think small landlords are doing it because they actually want to house people.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe they've come into a house from inheritance from, like an older person who died.
It's also much easier to hold. Charlie talked about this. It's much easier to hold a landlord who's got one property accountable for their property.
Yeah.
But these developers that have, like you're saying, they're slumlording all across the city.
Yeah.
That is such a bigger thing.
Dude, and Sidney Torres' younger son, Sidney Torres the fifth, is trying. He's like an up-and-coming slumlord now. There's this whole thing about converting houses into dorms pretty much and like targeting college kids. So if you have like a 4-bedroom.
Oh, I've seen this.
Yeah, doubles to dorms is
Doubles
what
to
they're called.
dorms, and people are protesting it.
Yeah, and Joe Geruso made, because it's mostly happening within District A in the Uptown area.
Uptown.
And his whole thing was like, oh, let's appease the landowners that are around there by like trying to restrict parking or like tying parking to it. Because that was where their complaint was, is like, I don't have a place to park because there's 9 people living in this house, and not, let's start actually enforcing the the ordinances that are in place.
Yeah.
Because these people are already breaking them.
Yeah.
And instead try to add even more tape on top of it. And just to get at is that, like, I think if we make housing like a guaranteed thing, there's so many empty properties right now in the city that are just sitting there. And so we have the stock available. So improve any of the rundown places to make them livable.
Get rid of Airbnb.
Yes. And make a system to where, like, if you need a place to live, you have a place to live. And if you can't afford it, then there's where that unlimited money goes.
It's afforded to you.
Yeah. No one's trying to actively rip off the government to get a free place to live. It's just every human being deserves a place
to live.
Yes.
Period. End of story. We have normalized in this nation so much suffering. It is so normal to see such massive suffering. It is normal for people to just say, well, you're homeless. If you're homeless, you're homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how is it normalized to you to see people piled up in the street struggling?
Mm-hmm.
How is that normalized?
Yeah.
And our nation has just done a really good job numbing people out to the suffering that surrounds them because it's so great. There's so much suffering. It feels negative to talk about it, but it's important to talk about it because it's like, it's the reality of it. And it's like, how do we acknowledge it and make it better?
Yeah. There's an unhoused person that is on my block like all the time. I live kind of in a busy intersection in Lakeview. And I don't mind him there, and I a couple of times have tried to engage him, but he doesn't seem interested. So I will respect his space.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I'm not going to try to complain about it on Facebook that, like, that guy's airing out his shirt on the Lakeview sign. Yeah. It's a sign. It's not like it's a living organism.
People
like
are
the
so
person.
delicate. They're so delicate. People really tie property with like worth. Like, that's the sign. He can't possibly put his shirt on this. It's like, who cares?
Well, look at Mardi Gras, man. Like, these people will stake out spots for Endymion for days, and like the crew of Chad. It's such an appropriator of something that is not yours.
When I do it, it's very okay. But when you do it, it's dirty. Yeah, no, you're so freaking right. I think that's a great noble cause. I mean, I'm right there with you. It would be a huge thing that I'd love to be able to see this city transform.
Same with child poverty. I just think it's unacceptable that our city allows so many children, particularly black children, to expect them to grow up into fully functioning adults when most of their life they've had to deal with housing instability, feeding themselves, and having a stable atmosphere to where they could be children.
Well, this is my $1 million idea. It's always been is that I want to have a program where we pick all the kids up from school that have nobody at home when they get home or don't have enough care, basically. We pick them up from school or they get dropped off by their buses at our center. It's like a big fucking place. And there's after school structured activities. There's after school chill activities. There's study rooms with people in there. There's dinner served. Everyone goes home with seconds or a snack. And they get picked up or there's like a bus at, 7:30 or whatever. And maybe we even have showers and stuff like that. Like, I just want some place for those kids whose parents have to work to survive.
Yeah.
And they've got nowhere to be and they're bored and they don't have a community and have access to like great extracurriculars, whatever curricular they want. And bridging the gap, getting them there, feeding them, making it so that people can survive and do what they need to do and like their kids are safe and like their kids are afforded the opportunities to do fun things too and not just have to skip out on cheerleading because of the uniform cost or whatever, like the kids are where my brain is. I'm always just like because the kids ultimately are going to be the adults.
Yes.
The kids need to love the city as much as we love it. They need to feel safe here. They need to like feel like they have a community, we're so lucky that we were so active as teenagers, and we built communities when we were really young. And that's a huge privilege that was afforded to us to be able to know. We didn't know that we were doing at the time.
But we had the space.
We had space outlets, I was able to do theater really young. And that's such a very lucky and privileged thing to be able to have and do. It didn't take me, an hour and a half on a bus to get home after school. I just got to go home. Well, I didn't actually go home. I did extracurriculars. But at the end of the day, I did. I just got to go home, Open the fridge. There was food. Go to bed. Text my friends. There wasn't any other concerns, So.
Yeah. And when we look at the charter experiment, I think that shows how the state of Louisiana has valued children.
Yeah.
When we look at continual pushes to try to charge children as adults, when you look at gun safety regulations, when you look at women's bodily autonomy, I think we've allowed that notion of individualism to just completely corrupt the concept that it's our kids. It is a community. Children have always been considered a part of the community. And we it takes a village to raise a child. It's not just some cliche. It is an instruction that you can't operate within a healthy society if you just assume that child is not my responsibility. And in fact, they are annoying me, or I don't want them anywhere near me.
An inconvenience.
Yes. When we look at the charter system and busing, like you said, the fact that the right to choice of school now means that these bus drivers are having to go on these massive routes to deliver kids from one school is not coordinated, right?
Yeah,
because
each
individual charter is its own little island.
Yeah.
The school board doesn't exist to actually try to, manage these entities so that maybe you could figure out, this bus is going all over the place. And the bus drivers are the ones that bus drivers and families are the people that suffer most from this. Yeah. And the people that are benefiting from it are the ones that don't have to do the work to make sure that those people's lives are better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hate to think that I'm some savior, because I'm not, but we need people that have common sense to start making their voices heard more.
Yeah.
And if it's not in a system to where they run for office, at the very least we should start setting up systems outside of the electoral strategies. Set up these systems that are very community based, that you can actually resolve problems by yourselves. And if you do need help, then that's when we start to build those communities into much larger structures that live alongside.
Just start living the life that you want. Adrienne Marie Brown says this, but she says, if you're a socialist, be a socialist right now. Are you living as a socialist right now? Are you making, and then when she's on more mainstream podcasts, she says, are you a Democrat? Then why are you not living democratically right now? But when she's on her own podcast, she says socialist, which I think is really funny. Yeah. But it's true. It's how am I living my values at this moment? And I think I'm living them well, but it's can we do better? Am I living them with my partner? Am I like taking the time to like, educate as much as I can, my family and like my immediate community are the people that I have the biggest effect on, So really acknowledging that like, it's my family and it's my partner and it's, the people that patronize my business. Those are my immediate community members. And like, what are the conversations that we have together and like, how does it make a difference?
Yeah.
To the greater movement of all of us together.
Yeah, you get out what you put in.
Yep.
And if you expect the system to naturally resolve itself, then you're going to be sorely disappointed over and over again, which is what happens, right? Democracy, when it was first conceived, was not about this, what is it called? Like deferred democracy, right? That like I'm deferring my responsibilities and decision making to someone else.
Yeah.
Instead, like it was about resolving things and coming to consensus. That was really it. Consensus building,
right?
In a form of taking a vote.
Yeah.
And obviously, when the Greeks did it, it was men only. It was property owners, and that's when you start to see, is it true democracy? When we feel like that. I love reading about Cuba and how they practice democracy, right? Because they're a democratic country. They're just not our democracy.
Right.
They are doing participatory democracy. They're doing direct democracy. And it's amazing to see what these communities do when you like see Americans go and start asking people and just filming, not from a sense of like to show how bad Cuba is and socialism, but to just learn about it and finding out all the lies that you've been fed over your life about how Cuba is this terrible, intolerant, totalitarian system. And you go there, it's like, nah, man, the neighborhoods like meet every month and like clean their own streets, and if there's a something that happens in their neighborhood, they all come together and fix it. Like
that's what's up.
They anticipate spending time with the people in their neighborhood regularly, not just for big moments.
Yeah.
Like I think about how many times we have block parties in New Orleans, second lines, parades. We know how to come together as a community to have fun.
Yeah.
And we can still use those opportunities to actually like make our lives better in addition to having fun.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope matures in this city, is people breaking down the boxes of like, my activism is over here, my social life is over here. It's like, it's got to come together.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Bob, this has been just a lovely conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like we covered so much ground.
We didn't even really talk about comedy at all, which I'm surprised about.
No, it's fine. This is great.
There's enough comedy podcasts out
Listen,
there.
I talk to comedians too much, I would say. So this was good to have a more political conversation.
Yeah.
And it was a goal of this season of mine. And I was like, I want to kind of get into the nitty gritty of the city. And I love having these conversations because I don't think they're happening enough. And podcasts are so accessible and they're underutilized on the local level. And like, I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk about all this stuff. This is important stuff. Not that comedy is unimportant. It's just like, this is also important, and
it's not important. let's be frank.
Comedy's fun. Okay.
Yeah. It's for the giggles.
It's for the giggles. But this has been great. I have my last question I always ask everybody is, I like to have people on this podcast that are cool or doing cool things.
Yeah.
Just some people that I would like there to be more light shined on. I was about to ask this. Who do you think should be on the podcast?
Do I have to know them?
No, you don't have to know them.
Oh, okay.
Just, you can tell me who and why.
I would say Dee Dee Green. She's the executive director of Piece by Piece NOLA. They do these community gardens around Holly Grove, but they also use it as opportunities to. It's mostly formed on education for kids, I think like 12 to 18. Dee Dee's wonderful. Their program is about self-sufficiency, finding responsibility for yourself, but also for each other, which I think is really important. They teach the kids about how to garden, how to take care of the full plant cycle. And all the produce that they make goes into these communities as well, because it's a food desert.
Yeah.
She's been a member of Violence Surveillance for a while as well, and I feel like those opportunities is how you learn about all the cool people.
Yeah.
Like getting into organizations, whether they're open membership or otherwise. Like try to join some organization. when I joined DSA, that's when I started to learn about a lot of stuff going on.
DSA stands for
Democratic Socialists of America. Yeah. The New Orleans chapter is fun. Got a lot of fun people. Yeah, and the more you join these places, you don't have to stay committed to them, but join them, meet people, find out their viewpoint on the world. Does it match yours? It may not fully match yours, but if you have that shared sliver of, common good and plans to work towards it, then you might as well do it. I also started I'm an atheist, but I go to church with my wife and our kid because the pastor there is very passionate. She's a feminist. She's a woman, so that's a big one, right?
That's big.
But we're trying to extend out the
what
ways.
What church do you go to?
St. Luke's United Methodist Church.
Okay, yeah, people love St. Luke on Canal, right?
Yeah. And we're about to do Little Mermaid for free.
I know.
So those are those opportunities where you do
my niece is in it.
Yeah, that's right. And just finding those opportunities to do community work that isn't necessarily going around picking up garbage, but doing plays for your community for free is a method of service, and I think that's really cool. So I'm on the mission committee and finding ways to plug in these people that want to express their faith and their energy in areas that they may not have normally done.
Yeah.
And so just trying to bridge the gaps.
Hell yeah.
That's all organizing is bringing people together.
We're bridging the gaps.
Don't sue us, Ronnie Lamarck.
Yeah, well, we're stealing it. Y'all, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Bob. This was great.
You're welcome.
Come back anytime. This has been Planet NOLA.
How's Tuesday?
Tuesday sounds good. I've got nothing on the books.
Okay, good.
This is Planet NOLA, y'all. Be in touch. Thank you again to this episode's guest. Planet NOLA is produced by Carrie Mulder and Mary Jacobs. If you liked what you heard here, please consider subscribing to us on YouTube or all your social media platforms and pretty much anywhere you get podcasts. Also, if you really, really liked this episode, think about subscribing to our Patreon, where we have tons of bonus content from this episode and more. It starts at just $5 a month, and it would mean the world to us. Thanks so much, y'all, and be in touch.